want something, go get it. Period.
If you circle around writing, you said that there's a need that we should develop a skill with writing. Could you tell me a little bit about what's your experience with writing? So, and this is a rather selfish question, because I have, with very specifically with academic writing, I have also felt some restraint, some reservation with that front, right? I've never been very comfortable with that. So if you could tell me what was your experience with writing, and how can someone explore writing, improve it to the extent where it becomes really qualitative as a contribution?
Yeah. So that question is close to my heart, in part because when I entered the law school, I had not written 200 words of my own, which were not mucked up, right? So even when you wrote essays in your high school and all of that, you knew that teachers have given the pointers. And for some reason, I grew up in a small town where this activity was not really promoted as such. It was just, as far as you're good enough to get good marks, it's fine. So you don't really produce your own work much. And most of my extracurricular work, if it all, happened in Hindi. So when I used to give speeches in school, or when I used to even debate, they used to happen mostly in Hindi. But with respect to English writing particularly, I had no major experience. So I kind of learned it during law school. I hadn't written anything of my own, even one full page, so to speak, or at least properly, right? Like at least grammatically correct and making some sense, not just putting some sentences down. So one way to do it is to look, there's no other way but to write more and more, right? There are, of course, a few books you could read, right? So one book that really helped me a lot, right, is this book called Style, Clarity, and Grace, right? So when I started law school, I thought, oh, good writing is the one that's very pompous, right? That's very that's using big words, that's throwing around sort of this high sounding words, and would make me sound very erudite and intellectual in front of my classmates if I use this. And I realized that many times I was just doing that because my thought process was not clear, right? I'm using this high sounding words because I don't know what to say. And I like, oh, people will get it because, this is just like our shared vocabulary. So one way so look, something precedes writing, which is thinking, right? And thinking, you can develop thinking in many ways. You can develop it through reading. You can just develop through, sometimes people develop thinking through daydreaming, right? Whatever it is. So think about your writing process as pretty much, now when I write, sometimes I just write. Most of the writing actually I do is not published anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. It's because I have developed a way of thinking where I'm just writing to think, right? So think of every sentence you're writing as sort of how it's adding to previous sentence, how it's connected to previous sentence, right? There's of course some grammatical issues, right? But that you perhaps could learn grammar separately. But beyond grammar, a big problem with writing is how it connects, how everything fits well together, right? And when I started, there's this, I don't know if you know about this Hindi film called Masan, and that is the song, right? Man Kasturi Re, and there are these two lines, Bikre Bikre Chand Sa Tehre, Doho Mein Ye Bandh Na Pawe. And that's like whenever I listen to that song and whenever those lines come, I'm like, this is exactly what writing process is. It's painful. Learning to write, how to write, and even once you have learned, it is a bit painful, right? Perhaps after a point when you've really developed mastery over it, it can come to you as a second nature, but it is still painful, right? Because you constantly are trying to connect many sentences together. It's not just things put down, but whether they're also making sense. So thinking of writing as thinking, so considering writing as a thinking process might help, right? And to write, and the best kind of writing is the one which is clear. And the writing that's clear is also the one that's preceded by clear thinking, right? So try to not mask your writing with using big words or sometimes explaining away things. And this old quip, right? Explain it like you'd explain it to a first year law student, I think is actually, or sometimes even when you're a first year law student, you'll be told, explain it to me like you're explaining your 10-year-old cousin, right? Is actually a good technique, because it really makes you ask some very foundational questions and perhaps make you think clearly, then explain it away things. So those are some of the tricks I'll sort of give you. And take time in writing. Don't try to produce so much. There is increasing tendency now where people are writing very quickly to get published, etc. But especially when you're a law student, it's good. So I didn't publish much until my fourth year. And many of the things that I published in my fourth, fifth year were mostly the things that I had written before. It's just that I was more I was trying to learn how to write, and I didn't want to publish earlier on. But it's once I was in fourth, fifth year and all, I tried to edit it and got them published because I wanted to publish a few things and put it out in public. But until then, the purpose was to just take time, write, and sometimes just write to learn how to write instead of necessarily putting out things to publish. And law and undergrad is great time for that because you have no pressure as far as you maintain decent grades. You know anything else can be added much later, right? CVs can be built much later. So, and it gives you a lot of time to do that.
Right, absolutely. I think I have a question, but this might sound very naive, but who cares? I have to ask you this because I'm going to use this opportunity. And I'll also tell you why I'm asking you this question. My question is, why is writing important? So I've just learned how can someone improve with writing? And everyone knows on a preliminary surface level basis that writing is important. But when it comes to law, legal education, or legal prowess, how much is writing important? So what kind of an impact does it have on either your branding or your presence or your knowledge? Or so why is it that an individual should strive to write? And the reason why I ask you this question is people usually ask me, why should one moot? Is it because people give you jobs because you moot? And I said, my understanding is no, it's not because people give you jobs. It's because you get to learn how to research and then you get to learn how to argue. And those are essential skills. So from that perspective, why should one, especially a law student, focus on writing? And why is writing such an integral part of this legal industry?
Right. Look, I think that legal industry is not even a necessary part there. Like, so just the fact that you're doing a law degree, right? You might want to use it in many ways. And that's increasingly happening. Law schools in India, at least, are not the place where people are only coming to become lawyers. It's kind of considered as a skill training, which you can use in many other places. People are doing many things. Now, doesn't matter what kind of professional job you do, right? Law schools, for instance, don't teach you how to do deep empirical analysis, right? It doesn't really teach you how to work with numbers. It doesn't give you any qualitative research experience. It doesn't teach you how to go and conduct interviews with people and, do ethnography and all of those things, right? So it doesn't give you those skills. Now, those skills might be there in other disciplines that you might do, right? So economics might have some of that. Anthropology might have some of that, etc. So what is it that you're really bringing on table for whatever job you're doing, right? It's that you could perhaps think in a more structured way, right? You could communicate in a clearer way, at least written form of it. Probably most jobs might not involve oral communication, but at least written forms of it, right? So, and as I said, learning to write well sometimes, and it's not necessary again, right? It's just that it can also help you think in a clearer way. And it has definitely helped me do that. And it is in no way necessary that you write academic pieces or that you necessarily do sort of legal writing per se. But just that you can communicate a sensible idea, or you can communicate sensibly in a written form, will be relevant to you even outside legal industry, even if you choose not to go into legal industry. So that's just one skill that law school teaches you, and it's all totally fine to not learn that. But but if you're at all relying on your degree, and what does that degree give? It's probably those are the few skills it gives you, and writing is very essential to it. But yeah, you could totally, I can imagine people, and I have some friends who totally abandoned anything to do with legal industry or even allied industries, right? And the writing is perhaps not even important to them. So that's fine. And it's I wouldn't exaggerate it. I wouldn't say it's necessary for everyone. But if you want to use your legal skills in any way, right, outside even law, then clear writing is definitely something that people might trust lawyers for, or at least structured writing. Sometimes it's not clear. We often use quite a few jargons, but yeah.
Right, definitely. And I think from the litigation perspective, because that is one that I'm, as of this stage in my own naivety, I'm the most comfortable with, writing definitely plays a huge role, especially when it comes to drafting pleadings and everything, especially when it goes before the courts. It creates a really very, very different kind of an impact when it comes from a lawyer who has a very beautifully drafted document, and you read those pleadings and then you understand, okay, fine, this is a quality work. And then there is another set of pleadings where you would clearly see that there is a fractured sense of logical flow of arguments. that I think definitely creates an impact. So there, I think writing becomes extremely important. With that, I think
it's in a way a service, right? You're saving judicial time by writing good
absolutely.
PD. Here's kind of a service to the system if you're writing clearly as well. Yeah.
Right. And it also becomes a medium of self-reflection as well, as you said. Like, if you want to communicate properly, writing becomes one of your essential tools.